Hey folks, this week is what's known as Sunshine Week, an annual celebration all about transparency. Every day, decisions are made in Washington that impact families and communities in Iowa and across the country. It is vitally important that you, the taxpayer, have access to this information so you have the power to hold decision makers accountable. While it doesn't always make me popular in Washington, it's important for Iowans to have access to all the information available about their government, especially how their tax dollars are being spent. This week and every week, you can be sure I'm going to continue to shine a light on the decisions being made in Washington that affect all Iowans, fight waste and fraud, hold unelected bureaucrats accountable, and to make Washington squeal.
Our democracy was built, as we all know, for the people, by the people, and hence is accountable to the people. The best way to be accountable is through transparency. So I come to the floor today, like I have a lot of years at this time of the year, to celebrate an important week that we celebrate then regularly, and it's known as Sunshine Week. During this week, we celebrate the birth of the fourth President of the United States, James Madison. Madison, as we all know, is the father of the Constitution, and maybe we don't know so much about him, but he also happens to be a father of the Constitution that believed in open government. He believed that access to information and meaningful oversight and accountability are foundational to the American system of government. In other words, the public's business ought to be public. This year, I'm continuing the Madison legacy by introducing several pieces of legislation. I'm also asking the Government Accountability Office to look into how the Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA as we call it, has been impacted by the pandemic. First, on the judicial side of things, I'm again advocating for cameras in the courts. In the last year, nearly every major institution from schools to Congress have adapted to the pandemic by being virtual. So I believe bringing cameras into the federal courtrooms would also bring in the public and open up access to our third branch of government. At the same time, I'm also asking the courts to provide transparency into our civil justice system by requiring the disclosure of all parties in a case. Litigation funders, such as hedge funds, are providing money to plaintiffs to bring lawsuits. This is all done in secret for many reasons. Everyone involved in the case, including the judge, including the defendant, should know that these parties funding these lawsuits exist. In other words, who they are. They're big players, or maybe you wouldn't have those cases. On the executive side, one of the most important tools the public has to hold its government accountable is the Freedom of Information Act, FOIA. Before its passage, people had to justify their need for information to the government. Can you believe there was a time when the public's business ought to be public that you had to justify the need for information? So FOIA was passed. After that passage, the government now has to justify its refusal to release information to you. In 2016, we took FOIA one step further by requiring the government to proactively disclose information. These obligations are mandatory, even during unforeseen circumstances. I'm deeply concerned that those obligations by that recent legislation are not being met. Even before the pandemic, the Government Accountability Office reported a significant increase in the number of FOIA requests and a big backlog in addressing those requests. Last May, the Department of Justice reported that the coronavirus impacted FOIA processing government-wide, as many agencies had limited ability to retrieve and process FOIA requests. That is why I'm joining Senators Durbin, Leahy, Cornyn in asking the GAO to examine FOIA processes and procedures in light of the coronavirus pandemic. Our hope is to continue refining FOIA to make government information accessible in good times and in bad. The public's business should be public. Maybe I should say except for national security reasons or privacy reasons. Many of you know I'm an Iowa farmer. I know that without sunshine, there cannot be growth. And both corn and democracy thrive in the light. Remember, once again, this is Sunshine Week. Transparency brings accountability. I yield the floor and suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.